So the video that you're about to watch was videoed on September 28th, and guess who forgot to press the record button? So the brief introduction was the students had picked the portraits and had begun working on their monologue project, working on their monologues, and they had met with Kathy and Mason and myself around certain design elements, and they had been working with Catherine around, some sort of sense of the project, but the majority of their time had been spent working with Kelley Jo Burke on the monologues, and so that's what we're going to talk about. That's what you'll hear about in this checkup.
To figure out what the intention of the artist is, and then figure out the best way to move them closer to what they want to have happen, because I'm a developmental dramaturg. There are other kinds of dramaturgists. There are production dramaturgists where you try to get everybody in line with what the production wants to be. There's research dramaturgists who go and pull out information about what's being created to help the director. But my job is to work with the 13 artists who are in the portrait project and help them build specifically a monologue to accompany the film that they will be creating in response to portraits. Each student picked a portrait. Some of them talked to me at that point as well when they were still picking. They then have been through 3 basic processes. First, they went through a character creation process where I gave them a couple of questions and visualizations to do based on their portrait so that they could write a response to one of a couple of questions. They were asked what's wrong, or what's happened, or what's changed. And then they were encouraged to think about the person that they saw in the portrait and then write a response to that question. We gave them 2 basic world options. Either the portrait character was going to be in the world of the portrait and responding in the reality of the portrait, which we called window into their world, or they were going to be responding to the viewer and know that they were a portrait, know that they were an artifact. And we called that Hogwarts Portrait Gallery. And I had thought that most of the writers would make that choice quite quickly. That actually has become a very fluid choice. And they all kind of started in the real world and then kind of moved into the artificial world. And now they're kind of moving where the change that happens during their monologue may in fact be the change from thinking they're in reality to realizing they're a portrait. So they did character building exercises, built a character based on the portrait, wrote that first monologue. They then met with me individually. We only had a half hour with each student, but they did extraordinary work in that half hour, because at that point we started talking about monologue structure, how something that exists typically on stage and takes up time and has to be worth taking up time, can be built. And we looked at very, very basic monologue structure, which is essentially essay structure. Question, but, therefore, wrap it up. And that was the half-hour workshops they did with me individually, and their initial sort of personal response, character building, then became something that was kind of monologue structured. We had one group reading after the character work. We had a group reading after the structure work, and immediately their ears were already tuned, and they started hearing when they were too long, when they were too passive, when they were too prosy. We introduced the idea right at the beginning about the difference between spoken language and written language. And because a lot of our artists in this project are great readers, but not necessarily experienced writers of speech, they went immediately to prose in their monologues. And so now in the second workshop, we were listening for voice, passivity, tempo, and present versus past tense. And almost everybody got the note, let's make it more present. Let's make things happen rather than tell about what's happened. And that's what they've been challenged with this week. Catherine's met with, I think, 2 or 3 people. I've met with a couple of them, and they're bringing the next iteration of their monologue to the Friday workshop to share with the production team, where I'm going to ask, because we have 13 students and because the monologues are not yet down to 90 seconds, they're all around 2 minutes right now. One of them is 3, but we're working on it. Because that takes time. That takes just reading those, setting it up, and closing it out takes about 5-6 minutes per person. So that's going to be a big chunk of that workshop. So what we're going to ask is for each student to bring their monologue, put the portrait up on the screen, and read what they've written so that the production team can hear the monologue in conjunction with the work. And at that point, we'll just open the discussion. And at that point, I kind of hand this off to Catherine again. And the students have all been given the invitation that as they need individual dramaturgy as they go along, they can continue to book appointments with me, but there won't be the kind of scheduled ones that we had last week. And next they go off to Christine Els, the extraordinary filmmaker and teacher, and she's going to be doing what's essentially a visual dramaturgy. It's going to be storyboarding. She's going to be helping them figure out shots and stuff like that, but I anticipate that the film storyboarding will be, in effect, a 4th dramaturgy of just thinking about what we lift out of from words and make simply action. And I think that that's why I'm not as worried about, I think they're going to be pretty close to time once they're through the storyboard process. And that's me. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Kelley Jo. And yeah, that whole world of the written world that we're used to in theater versus the visual world of cinema is quite different. So, although, you know, I get increasingly playwrights are becoming more like film writers, so I think we're more used to that world now as well. Catherine, did you want to just talk about that little that bridge between the visual and the verbal?
Sure. Kelley Jo kind of set it up very nicely, you know, in terms of the process. So I won't talk a lot, but, you know, at least with the students that I have met already, we've started talking about how you see the monologue rather than how you know, how you're writing it, right? So they're working at setting it up like a film script, right? Because the film script has a lot of not stage directions, but it has a lot of camera shot directions on it. And sometimes 2 shots are half a page, but in the movie, they give you tons of information about what's happening, right? So we're kind of moving in that direction so that when Christine comes in and gives her lecture, Christine Els, they will have a sense of the shots that they want to storyboard. And that is really an invitation to have a conversation with Thomas Gallagher. So the storyboard is like, you know, an invitation to give Thomas their ideas around what they would like to do. It's still flexible and fluid, as Kelley Jo said. So yeah, that's exciting. That's where we're at.
And it's interesting because there's so many ways of, these monologues are being dramaturged so many ways. You know, with written word and visually, and it's just it's a crash course, I think, in learning a number of languages as well, right? I think that's probably one of the challenges that they're faced with is, film has a whole different language than theater does, and theater has a whole different language than writing poetry, right? So it's
and yeah, I would just reiterate, you know, what we said at the beginning, which it's a real hybrid between theater and film. You sort of have a foot in theater and a foot in film. So it's really nice the way Kelley Jo has set them up to move from, you know, from where they are into this whole kind of section of filming it. So it's kind of, it's been really interesting to see how it develops, because of course we've never done this before, right?
Oh, exactly. So, it's a
yeah.
new territory. So Kathy, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been up to these days?
Yeah, hello everybody. I am right now working on costume pieces that with along with Catherine and Wes and Mason, that the students, we've all been devising for this piece, and I'm building them and getting them ready to set up, to get packed up and go out to the students. So I've got their pieces all hanging there, and so, and with sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I'll get back to it. So and they're all being tied together, as you know, with the coronavirus. So the backdrops, Wes, you can talk about that too, what you've been doing. They look great, and I think it's going to look great tying it all together. And we've got coronavirus beads and mace things that's all bringing everything together. So yeah, there's a lot. I'm doing a lot of cutting and sewing right now to get this project up and running. So because we don't have what people think we have in storage. We just, you know, it's not a plethora of pieces down there for everybody. So I bought the fabric, stuff is getting built, and that's where I'm at, and it's coming together, and the pieces are looking good. So
Yeah, and it's a bit bizarre because usually you've got actors' bodies to actually work with, and we don't have that now, right? So it's a bit of good guessing, perhaps. Hope that they were honest with their measurements.
yeah, I asked them to supply me with 3 measurements and their height, which does tell me a lot about a person. That alone gives you a lot of information. And I do know a lot of the students, but measurements change over a semester. So I always update those measurements, and that's what I'm going off of. So, and I'm going to be sending out safety pins and double-sided tape.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, it's an interesting world to find, to like build costumes without actors. It's just, it's an odd place to find oneself, I think. So, and we did, Mason and Kathy and I met with the students last week with half-hour intensive as well to sort of talk about the portraits, and at some point along the way, we stumbled upon this idea of ensuring that every actor within the portrait had a mask and a set of green hazmat gloves, which they also had to incorporate into the piece somehow. That was their challenge that we gave them, because they don't have enough challenges yet. We needed another one. So, well, thanks, Kathy, and we'll just pop to Mason then.
Hello. So yeah, I've been just kind of doing some mock-ups now that we've met with the students. We know what their portraits are, their ideas, and things like that. So we're just kind of testing a few things that are going to work, things that aren't going to work, and we've started to build a few props and things that tie everything together. Kathy was talking about things like coronaviruses, so we've made like a mace, which was one of the weapons in the thing. One of the things was oranges, and so instead we're going to have like corona oranges. Yeah, just some weird ideas that we were pulling together. Yeah, my job really is to troubleshoot it, make sure it's going to work for them. And what else is there? The backdrops are kind of built and ready. We've had a few different ideas on how we're going to use them in the homes and trying to create something as simple as possible. And then because all the material is here, we have to kind of get it all together, package it up, and get it to them. So yeah, that's more of a technical side of organization.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and I mean, you've been having lots of fun because we have a 3D printer, so it's been getting lots of work for this production. Probably a great introduction to it, right? Because we need molecules of all sorts of sizes. So
yeah, it's been interesting to use that, but at the same time, it's not my forte right now. But thank God somebody out there is making all this stuff, so I can just steal it.
And it's again, it's just interesting to sort of again build this show with no one around, and then knowing that they're each going to have to shoot in their own home or apartment or living room or wherever. Also, then I think sort of affects the aesthetic of the pieces as well. So that's why we're trying to unify them with these backdrops and the gloves and these pieces that are all similar, can tie all the pieces together, because they will be shot randomly in places we don't know and have very little control over. So we'll talk to Thomas and Rachel, who's doing lighting next time, because they'll be full into it by then, and lots of fun. So any sort of, just before we wrap up, any last thoughts anyone has that they want to, Catherine?
I just wanted to know if you had anybody in your class that was also in the show.
I think I do, but I would have to check my class list again, because I've got both the theater course and the English course. So I've got like 30 students there, so I can't remember who's all in it. But yeah, there must be.
Well, they're going to move after Thomas, or into coaching for film and television. So their performances. So they're getting a really nice progression there.
Yeah, I think it's a great project, and it's so much, I think, more fulfilling than just live streaming something that is what a lot of drama departments are doing this semester, if they're doing anything at all, right? So, Kelley Jo, any last thoughts? This may be our...
Just that I actually think that the speed of the process isn't a bad thing at all. I think that it has launched the kids very directly into the work. I think they already have real ownership of their particular, not just their portrait, but the person that they invented to be that portrait. They have a strong sense of their identity in the project, and they got it really quickly. And I think that that's going to make a lot of the decision making that has to happen after this really quite clear. I think what the kids think they can do and what is actually possible, that's another issue. But in terms of what they want, they're really quite clear about their wants. And I really like that.